James Otis was a successful lawyer from Boston, Massachusetts, who played a key role in shaping the ideology of the American Revolution. Otis was an active member of the Boston Sons of Liberty, along with his good friends Samuel Adams and John Adams, and other prominent patriots, including John Hancock and Dr. Joseph Warren. Otis was a prolific writer and speaker, and used his skills to lead opposition to British policies, including writs of assistance, the Sugar Act, the Townshend Acts, and the Stamp Act. He is often credited for the phrase, "no taxation without representation," as well as "a man's home is his castle." His influence can be found in the Bill of Rights, the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which protects Americans against unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fourth Amendment reads, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." Otis also saw all people as equal, with the same rights, regardless of skin color. An argument can be made that he should be considered a founding father because of his early arguments for rights and liberty. Otis was an advocate for freedom for all men, regardless of the color of their skin. In Rights of the British Colonies, he wrote, "The colonists are by the law of nature free-born, as indeed all men are, white or black." On May 23, 1783, Otis was at the home of Isaac Osgood with some other people. Otis was standing in the doorway telling a story when the house was struck by lightning. Otis was killed instantly. He was 58 years old. He is buried at the Granary Burying Ground in Boston, Massachusetts. The Granary Burying Ground in Boston is one of the city's oldest and most haunted cemeteries. It is the final resting place of many notable figures from the American Revolution, including Paul Revere, Samuel Adams, and John Hancock. The Ghost of James Otis Jr. One of the most famous ghost stories from the Granary Burying Ground involves James Otis Jr., a prominent lawyer and early advocate for the American Revolution. James Otis Jr. suffered a severe head injury during a bar fight in 1769, which significantly affected his mental health. September 5th, 1769, Otis came across Robinson at the British Coffee House in Boston. The two of them started shouting at each other, and a fight broke out. The details of what was said prior to the fight and the fight itself are mostly unclear, as there are several affidavits and newspaper stories that contain different details. It seems that a crowd made up mostly of soldiers and officers from the Army, Navy, and Revenue Office surrounded Otis and Robinson as they fought. A Boston merchant, John Gridley, said he saw the crowd helping Robinson. Gridley thought that made things unfair and rushed in to help defend Otis. Otis received a serious blow to the head, and blood ran from it immediately. Gridley was struck on the head and wrist by people in the crowd. Eventually, the fight broke up. Otis and Gridley were carried out. Robinson and his friends, supposedly the other commissioners, left the coffee house. He became increasingly erratic and was eventually struck by lightning in 1783, leading to his death. Otis was buried in the Granary Burying Ground, and it is said that his spirit still lingers there. Visitors to the Granary Burying Ground have reported seeing a ghostly figure dressed in colonial attire, believed to be James Otis Jr. This apparition is often seen wandering near his grave, and some have even claimed to hear him muttering about taxation and tyranny. One particularly chilling account comes from a night watchman who reported seeing Otis's ghost standing by his tombstone, staring intently at the ground as if lost in thought. In addition to James Otis Jr., the Granary Burying Ground is said to be haunted by other spirits, shadowy figures, unexplained cold spots, and the feeling of being watched are common experiences reported by visitors. The cemetery's eerie atmosphere, combined with its rich history, makes it a fascinating place for both history enthusiasts and ghost hunters. If you're ever in Boston, a visit to the Granary Burying Ground is a must. Whether you're there for the history or the hauntings, It's sure to be an unforgettable experience.
Major John Andre was a British officer who played a significant role in the infamous plot involving Benedict Arnold. Andre was captured by American forces while carrying documents that revealed Arnold's plan to surrender West Point to the British. He was tried as a spy and hanged in 1780. For many, even on the American side, Andre left a legacy of honor. Although his request for execution by firing squad, considered a more honorable death than hanging, was rejected. According to law, he placed the noose around his own neck. Americans were taken by his charm and intellect. Washington referred to him as being more unfortunate than criminal, an accomplished man, and a gallant officer. Hamilton wrote, "Never perhaps did any man suffer death with more justice or deserve it less." Across the Atlantic, Andre's monument in Westminster Abbey bears a mourning figure of Britannia that is inscribed in part to a man universally beloved and esteemed by the army in which he served and lamented even by his foes. The site of Andre's execution in Tappan, New York, is said to be haunted by his restless spirit. The Old 76 House, a tavern where Andre was held before his execution, is a focal point for these ghostly encounters. Visitors and staff have reported seeing Andre's ghost, often described as a tall figure in a British uniform, wandering the premises. One of the most famous accounts comes from a former tavern keeper who claimed to have seen Andre's ghost on multiple occasions. The apparition was often seen near the fireplace, where Andre spent his last days. The tavern keeper described the ghost as having a sorrowful expression, as if reliving the moments leading up to his execution. Tourists visiting the Old 76 House have also reported eerie encounters. Some have felt sudden cold spots, heard unexplained footsteps, and even seen the ghostly figure of Andre standing by the window, looking out as if waiting for something. One visitor recounted feeling a tap on the shoulder, only to turn around and find no one there. The story of Major John Andre adds a poignant and eerie chapter to the history of the Revolutionary War. His tragic fate and the subsequent hauntings at Tappan serve as a reminder of the war's human cost and the lingering spirits of those who played pivotal roles.
Oh, very cool. Hello, gatekeepers. Welcome, welcome, welcome in. And it's so good to see you. And wow, what a week it's been. We are on episode 3 of our summer watch party, our Revolution in Rewind. And it's just amazing to me. And from a lot of you guys I've been talking to throughout the week and after the last episodes and in preparation for, the episodes and everything, how many parallels and how many people that lived 248 years ago that we have so much in common with still today. Their words speak as if they're talking to us right now. This could be at the local tavern, leaned into a good cold pint, and saying, yeah, this has gone a little too far. I think we should do something about this. Let's go meet and throw some tea in the harbor, or let's boycott this, or what do you think about that? And not much has changed, right? And I thought it was very profound to have Otis and Major Andre, their a little bit of their history, a little bit of their profound fingerprints on our country, the way it was, the foundation of it, for sure, that we still use today. I mean, can you imagine to ever hope to say something that somebody would remember you said 250 years later? Have you ever thought it was possible that you could be doing something today that maybe somehow would be pulled up by, some teenager doing a report in high school or in some other documentary of some kind, because something you did had the butterfly effect and caused another thing, or something you did that had no idea how profound it would be, or maybe you wrote a song and it touched a lot of people. Maybe you wrote a book that touched a lot of people. maybe did a podcast or a documentary of your own that reached people. And it's funny to go back 250 years ago. How was that happening then? Since I've been doing this episode, Liberty, of course, based on the 1997 PBS documentary that we were watching, that's one thing I thought an awful lot about, was the time it took. And Lynn and I spoke about it on the first episode, how long it took to get a letter across. How long did it take a general to get orders? What do you want me to do about this? They're burning down the whatever, or they're stockpiling this, or they're having meetings, or, that kind of thing. What do you want me to do about it? And you write the letter, you seal it with the wax, hand it to the guy runs it to the ship, he hands it to the, and it's just bop, 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 bop. 6 weeks across, and then it does the same thing in reverse and winds up in the king's hands, or whoever the advisor to the king is, the parliament at least, read in front of them. Everybody decides, and when they decide, then they send a letter back, and the whole thing repeats. It's funny, we just had a major event pretty much a week ago, right? And communication was so broken there. You got to wonder, was it better 250 years ago? Because still, just like so many people here in the Revolutionary War, and I talked to Steve about it. I got a chance to talk to him a little bit about how, the military tactics and things that, different, amazing amount of things that almost overlap on top of each other. This light's killing my eyes again. But from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War, and, communication was similar, somebody on a fast horse, right? Somebody brave enough. Hey, Scott. Hey, Henry. Hey, Ted. How you doing, sweetie? Uncommon. Good to see you guys. It just blows my mind. And then I look back at a week ago, and it doesn't seem like they've sorted the communication issue out very well either. How amazing was that? I'm telling you, Native Americans had it down a long time ago, smoke signals, man. I'm being cheeky. How y'all doing? Look, you gotta laugh. You're gonna have to laugh through this summer. But I do hope that watching this, I know Froze is watching it with me, and Lynn is back. She's back from vacation. She sends her love, and she's watching 3 right now, I think, or with us. She might pop into the chat. Told her, don't worry. When you just relax. We've got all summer. We're doing this, and there's going to be plenty of revolution to go around. Just saying. So anyway, yeah, that's another parallel, and we hadn't sorted that one yet. So, how y'all doing? I hope you've had a good week. It's been an amazing week. It's been a lot of researching and studying this as well as other things, and trying to keep in front of this crazy train. It's what a ride, man. But like I said, I thought it was important to bring up Otis and Andre again. And I did in the middle of the week, and I premiered it. So it was a little short video just on a couple of the ghost stories. There's so many ghost stories from the Revolution, and I'm going to try to pepper them in through this whole series as well as all the other stuff. But Andre, if you think about these people, they're not just characters, they're real people. They're people just like us that didn't realize at the time that they were involved in very historic times. And, if they had a brain in their head, they probably realized it. Most officers and people in the higher echelons of the military, or any kind of decision making, whether it be parliament or whether you're wearing a uniform, or Congress, you're involved, and you're doing something people are going to talk about. This probably be in the history books. And in fact, it's in many quotes. What will the history books say of me? I don't want to be that guy. There's a couple of people in Congress that felt that way. They waited for somebody else to pull the pin, But there was also those people, of course, hundreds of thousands will never know. Their story didn't get told, or maybe it got told in a letter home from another soldier, that told the story. Or maybe, in eyewitness account, or something else comes up that, uncovers the story. And Otis's story, he had his fingerprints on many things. The amendment to, for unlawful search and seizure, and so many things that are still today. And this guy had the unfortunate luck to get hit in the head in a bar fight. Right? That's what it boils down to. And he's a little squirrely after that. He's a little, he's got he's a little touched, and, but he's all right. He's still, a very smart, intelligent man. And he was over somebody's, I guess, a dinner party, whatever, standing in the doorway. House gets hit by lightning. He gets struck by lightning, deader than a doornail. Boom, right there in the parlor. Now his ghost wanders around Granary Cemetery, where a lot of these patriots were buried, because it's downtown Boston, near Boston Common, near, where all the action was, and so many are buried there. We talked about Christopher Sider too, the young 11-year-old, let's just say 11. There's a lot of 10, 11, 12. People argue his kid, one of the, was it Boys of Liberty? Yeah. So anyway, these people, they lived and they touched us enough that we can still say their names, even though it's not extremely common, 250 some odd years later, and see that we are still using things that they had something to do with. And you'll hear more about Major Andre later on down the line, but he's in there, and his ghost is said to be seen where he was killed too. And but Otis is wandering around the cemetery mumbling about taxation and tyranny. And he's still, his spirit is still at unrest. And, let's hope now it is. By now, we can only hope. And if not, if you're over there and you want to do a solid, go over there and talk to Otis and tell him how to get crossed over, because it's time. 250 years, that's enough. He might be having problems because of the sorting things, because he had that head injury too. You have to take that in consideration. You know what I mean when you're talking to ghosts? But anyway, I digress. It's wild to think that he's still doing that, and we're still grumbling about the same thing, and still have a right to, and a need to. And then you've got Andre, who is basically, he's working for his side. He's doing what he feels is right. He's a spy. He's a good one too. He was a slick son of a gun. He really was. Very well portrayed in Turn. Turn, is it Turn? Yes, in Turn, as that actor you saw there at the very end, if you saw that ghost story. Very well played, for all the things I've read on Andre and seen in different places. And if I had to put his character together, that would kind of be what I would try to come up with too. It was perfect, but your opinion may, your mileage may vary. So if you know something about Andre, let me know. But yes, Ted, unconditional. Yeah. But there was also something that happened with Andre that if you saw there at the end, they were talking about how he died. And that was the biggest thing with his death, and everybody's saying, what was your legacy? What did you leave behind? So many people were saying about him that he didn't deserve to die, although they know he was a spy, and that was treason. And treason, there was one punishment for treason. That's it. Done. No questions asked. Ask Nathan Hale. This poor, was he a school teacher? He was like a school teacher. He was involved in the school, something with it back then. And he was not really like a Ichabod Crane, but he kind of reminded me of a cool one. It was just a young, slender kid that just wanted to not let the war be over before he did something, did his part, and all his friends knew, Nathan, he's cut out to be a spy, man. You don't have the mannerisms, and you're a little bit too, your heart's in it, but he kind of had I don't want to say like a Barney Fife kind of personality, but sort of like that, where Barney Fife was kind of very devoted to, and his beliefs and everything else, and he just wanted to do his part, but he didn't quite have all the right tools to do that part as a spy, and his friends knew it, but he, trudged on. God bless him. And I don't know if it was his first assignment. I think it was. But bless his heart, he got caught. And he never said, as far as I know, it is my opinion, I'm of the mind that he never really said, I regret that I have but one life to live for my country. But because it was attached to him, we remember that, and it gives us hope, where you think, man, to have that kind of patriotism, to have that kind of, this is my land, and I'll, something bigger than me. I'm going to fight for it. Something bigger than me. I believe it and put everything into it. And he had that. But the phrase comes from a play that was out. He really wasn't, it's possible he went and saw that play. It was possible it was being used just like we do now, where phrase gets used for a couple of months, gag me with a spoon, and people hear it. They may not use it in their vocabulary, in their everyday speech, but they're familiar with it because it's a slang going around. Groovy, peace man, that kind of stuff. 23 skidoo. Every decade's got them, right? Might even go faster now because of the information. But with Andre, they caught him as a spy. If you know the story, you'll hear it well here. It's not in this episode. It's down a little bit when we start getting into West Point and Benedict Arnold and traitors and spies and, heroes. Oh my. So I like Andre. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that didn't like Andre. That's the point. He was just a cool character. He was a smooth criminal. You know what I mean? And he did his job. He did it well. And he had nothing but honor. Nothing but honor. And that's what people like too. And a lot of these guys had that. But here this guy gets caught. I won't tell you the whole story now. Spoiler alert. But he gets caught in the middle of a spy deal gone bad. And one of the kind of nick of time, for our young country trying to win a war here, because, all things are fair in love and war, they say, but some things you just got to look at and go, that was close. So many that was closest, sure, it's true on both sides. But anyway, Andre gets pinched, right? And it's one of those last minute things. It's very dramatic. And, he gets caught and he almost gets away. And he's like, oh, he almost gets it. And you're kind of rooting for him because it's Andre. He's kind of, he's a nice guy. And he just happens to be an enemy doing his job just like we would. And that was a general kind of consensus among these guys. And here comes Talmadge. I think he was captain. You'd have that wrong. Under George Washington, working for George Washington. And he is pretty much the one in charge of, or second in command of, the Culper spy ring. And he gets word that they caught Andre. They found the information in his boot, things written out, right? And they foiled the plot for Benedict Arnold, and all the other stuff. And again, you'll hear that whole story later down the line. But he gets caught red-handed. And he was the most reluctant hanging, the most reluctant punishment, I think, given out by George Washington. At that point in time, George Washington was ripped. just emotionally ripped because he just found out one of his trusted generals, one of the best generals there was through this whole Revolutionary War, Benedict Arnold, and a very good friend, and someone he thought had his full devotion and sure had his, did a 180 and turned. And now he's got to kill Andre. So, but that's the rules. And Andre puts his own, the way he went out was so, it was very honorable. And that's why that's written on his monument. But he too haunts because who knows, right? So very sad, but just like Otis, there's things that last still today, that are still true today. And there's one punishment. For treason. Just saying. And that also, like I said, it's interesting how those kind of things last. So how you guys doing? Doing good? You been keeping up with all the stuff going on? Who do we have in here? Who is watching Liberty with me? Who's got to see it? Now, if you want to watch it, I also found it in the archives. I don't know if I gave you that link before, but I can see if I can pull it up here. Let me do it this way. That way I'm not hitting buttons. Okay, pardon my turning my head here. Thank you, Ted, for dropping my PayPal. I appreciate that, sweetie. Let me see if I can pull this up because I want you guys to be able to see this. This is one of the best, and I also found another one for you guys. I like the, what is it called? Fox did it. Not to found Fox, but the, I think it was like Patriots History and Lies or something like that. If you guys have seen it, let me know. But this is a link to Liberty. And it is in the archives, and it's kind of set up like a playlist, so you can just watch it straight. And here's the good thing about it. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit, I don't want that. It's a little bit better for the quality of it. Okay. Let me put in documentary. It might help. Trying to get it for you guys. Hold on. Yep, here it is. It's on YouTube though. No. I think that's it. Yep, that's it. Okay. So if you guys are watching it, I want to know what your thoughts have been on the first 2 episodes. I'm going to tell you what Kat found for us, and then we're going to get started. We're going to watch this and go through. But I want everybody to be able to have this for free, and I thought this was cool. So, perfect. I think I got it. I'm sorry, guys. I did it the hard way, but I just didn't want to hit any buttons and knock all this stuff out. There you go. So if you guys want to watch it, if you're going to watch it through the summer, Lynn will probably be back maybe next Sunday. I think Sunday after that, and she'll be joining us. And I just thought that was interesting that we're still upset about the same things, and that's the whole point of watching this, and also getting inspiration. These people have been absolutely inspirational to me. And tonight we're going to talk about Valley Forge. Valley Forge is not far from where I am right now. And it is in Pennsylvania. And as you can see in these pictures, it is very, very much wilderness and woods and, everything that goes with that, out in the open. Not a lot going on here for these guys. Washington, if you dig into Washington, now this is a what Valley Forge looked like, in what was it, 1778? And another great picture here, the quarters. Guys, there was very few tools to use. There was very few. Have you been there, Henry? That's amazing. So how did that look to you? Does it look, everything seems small, the doorways and how they were built, but and I'm sure the replicas at this point, of course, but the point is how everything, we just got to build it. We got to make it, basically they built a city out of, and it was very, very simplistic. And keep in mind too, you're not hearing a lot about, it's not just the men, it's women, it's children, it's the dogs, it's the pigs, the goats, the horses, it's everything. This winter was really something else. It's not just showing, these people didn't have to stay, folks. You'll hear some of the British generals and people talking about it. It's like, I'm not even sure how many soldiers I'm fighting, because it seems like Washington's army at one moment is 3,000, and the next minute, it's 15,000. And it keeps changing. Again, that darn communication block. But it was also true, because people would leave, and George Washington has to keep coming up with ways to get people to stay. How would you convince somebody to stay in conditions like this? They have very few blankets. They have, in the winter of 1777, I was right, to 1778, at Valley Forge was challenging for the Continental Army, I'll say. Though it wasn't the harshest winter of the Revolutionary War, but they experienced periods of severe cold, with temperatures dropping as low as 6 degrees Fahrenheit, as we are in America, in late December, and 8 degrees in late March. Okay. January and February also saw lows of 12 and 16 degrees Fahrenheit, respectively. So no, you're short on blankets. You're short on provisions, food, everything. And you've got to feed all these animals, all this livestock, and these kids and these families. There's only so much hunting. This is why they're not fighting in the winter. They stop because they can't feed the cattle. They can't feed the horses. There's no grass. It's insane. It's hard to wrap your head around it. Washington is banging his head against the wall, saying, against everything they've already been through, which they will go through it much better than I am now. I'm just telling you about this first. But it blows my mind how he is trying to keep these people here. And you can hear it from soldiers, how long did they sign up? Most of them signed up for, short stays, and that was almost up. He's about to lose the little bit he's got, George is, and he doesn't know what to do. And he's really in dire straits. And he's trying to fight, I don't want to say as you constantly hear in this show, the most fierce military in existence at the time. I wouldn't say that was true. Darn big and absolutely monstrous compared to what we had, 13 little colonies and, some hired pirates for a navy, what it boils down to. But the people had a vision, and the people had heart. And you've got the Sons of Liberty trying to keep turning up that, keep up that good work. Okay, everybody, we're going to boycott. Everybody's got to work harder. We got to do without, and we also need to get stuff and make bullets and try to provide for the army. And you got this makeshift colonial Congress. It's just, egos bouncing around the room like, nobody's business, and trying to sort out where 13 colonies that pretty much have been their own, like, little countries as far as they were concerned until now, trying to come in as a whole and agree to one thing, and move to the same drummer, the same beat, and then you've got people like John Adams trying to quell the fights in the streets and keep the riots to a dull roar. And, you got people tar and feathering, and Sam Adams is trying to figure out how do we get these people's emotions up and get them moving in one beat, without killing each other and not tearing things up. Well, it's impossible because you have groups that, bounce off, and they're fighting and pulling people out of houses. And, I'm for the king, and I'm for, our own country, and we're just that's it. And you've got humans are being humans in the streets and in the shadows. There's crooks, and then there's people that they just want to be free. They just don't want to be under this tyranny. They just don't want to go back to how things were before. They're feeling their oats, right? And everybody is at this crescendo at this point, and trying to find who they are and why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they struggling through? Why are they fighting to get through this? Why are they going without pins and sugar and salt and making their life harder? It was already pretty tough. Why are they not able to trust their neighbor? Why can't they go to the close shop? Why are they passing that just because this person still believes we should stay British and go by the king's rules and walk an extra, everything they did was maddening, an extreme sacrifice, an extreme struggle. And now you get to Valley Forge, where George Washington is trying to hang on to these guys. And he also realizes he can't fight this grand army of the British who were trained, had money to hire the Hessians, who were hired soldiers and very well trained, stop at nothing like freight trains, This is what he's up against. And look at these poor guys. Half of them don't have shoes. They're marching in the snow, the trail of the blood in the footprints. Are you kidding me? Yet they trudge on. That's a winter soldier. The summer soldiers and the people who showed up just thought it was going to be fun and got scared and took off or whatever, long gone. These are winter soldiers. I have a feeling we got a lot of winter soldiers in the chat and listening right now. So when you watch this, I want you to get hope and inspiration, and maybe, like I said, find somebody that you identify with. Maybe throw out a lot of that, the stereotypical stuff that you heard about certain people. Listen, George Washington, he's my guy tonight. I love so many of them for many different reasons, but George Washington doesn't get near the credit. It's got down to a joke with the cherry tree and he slept here and this kind of thing. And these people thought he was a bumbling idiot and whatever. Walk in his shoes through this 8 years. Look at the decisions he had to make and what he had to work with, and begging Congress for help and getting none or very little. Right, Froze? And then he has to decide how to do things, pulling little tricks like the one you're going to hear about tonight, and using mind-boggling military fakes to ward off an attack, to run and scatter, make them chase you, wear them down, the terrain better, all of these things. And, they look at it like, well, we get there and they run away. Well, of course they run away. He's got a very small army. If he stays and he battles, he'll be all dead. You don't have an army. We'll lose. They have to keep moving. And it's incredible, the stuff that they do. So what I'm saying is give George a chance and open your mind. And let's see what you guys are saying. Let's see here. Let me get this off. But I wanted to tell you, the thing that happens at Valley Forge that really turns things around, it's not only everybody's hand in it, and you'll hear it tonight. Thomas Paine, of course, had a hand in it with American Crisis, and George Washington and he would not give up. If nothing else you pull from this whole series about George Washington is he he would not give up. All these things right here, surrender or a draw and all this, that's not it. If you look at why he made the choices he made, oh, okay, under those conditions, yeah, maybe he made the right choice, or maybe if he had help or money or whatever, under his conditions, he did damn good. And look at him, and he didn't give up. He was a winter soldier and a great leader. He really was. Now, compared to some of the other ones like, Hal, the Howes and brothers and Cornwallis and all, they all had something. This guy started with nothing, fought with nothing, and knew that the only way he was going to win this was to get somebody to whip these guys into some kind of order, show them how to be soldiers, show them how to stay alive, work together, and become as one. Washington's doing that here in Valley Forge and on every battlefield till this point. Sam Adams, John Adams, Dr. Warren, Ben Franklin, all of them, they're trying to work it out and control groups in the streets and get people rallied and get things more organized. Congress, First Continental Congress, they're meeting under the big elm tree and they're saying, what do we do? And they go and they meet in Philadelphia and they talk about this and they say, well, how come Washington can't win any battles? They said, well, for one, he doesn't have any ammunition. Doesn't have any food. He's working with militia that's never worked together. He's got people from Virginia sleeping in tents, 10 to a tent with Rhode Island boys, and they're like from different countries. Washington has to find something that they all can share, and one thing that they all fight together for. And they find that, I think, at Valley Forge, because they come out of there totally different. So a lot of that was attributed to that man right there, and that is von Steuben, and you will hear about him a little tonight too. And there's just so many outside influences as well. The Marquis de Lafayette. It's just so many. And it really is a kickoff to not just the new country as one country in America, a combining of the colonies. It's people in other countries getting a taste of that too. And I think that was like a big thing. This freedom you have. What an idea. What an idea to have people of so many different backgrounds coming together, just longing to be free and trying not to encroach on the next person's group's freedom and trying to coexist and cohabitate in that, and it's kind of wild. It's a wild concept if you look at it and you think, okay, well, it would have been nice if when they came here, they tried to get along with Native Americans that were decent, because there were some bad ones too in every group. And then you look at the British side of it and you think, okay, they're like teenagers that grew up too fast and they're getting really, a little, too big for the britches or whatever, and they need to be punished and told who's boss. And King's not having it. He keeps sending people over and these grandiose armadas of, all these ships and stuff, all these soldiers so well trained, and here's these guys, wow. It's just, it blows my mind. A small militia of devoted and dedicated individuals, of all of these people that we've heard of, your Molly Pitchers and your Nancy Harts and all the people behind the scenes too, these kids and these drummer boys and everybody else that's all involved. And I think the biggest thing, if you're not going to pull it, for like George Washington to reconsider what a grand dude this was, he really was something else. But to take away that in hard times, we can get so much from this, because that's what we're trying to do too, is keep small groups from not losing their minds, to keep peace in the streets, to keep peace throughout our country, and to keep our country same, And how do you get small groups to function on a basis of common sense and not just emotion, and give them enough emotion that they're empowered to do the things that they will have to do to create that world, but not too emotional that they destroy themselves while they're doing it, such as in war, or some of the other things that they, definitely got out of hand here. I mean, it gets pretty ugly. And the same again, you can overlap the Civil War on top of it. You had these groups that got empowered because the British came in and said, okay, we want you to go out there and get rid of all the patriots and the rebels, get them out of there, and just leave the Tories and the loyalists. So well, how do you know? So what did these guys do? They just went out and fulfilled their vendettas and their own choices. Hey, this is perfect. Let's go get Tom, and take out all his cattle. And I mean, they just go through and decimate somebody's farm, rape and kill like Vikings, just all out. And then you had the same with Quantrell's Raiders and people like these groups in Civil War. Doesn't change. Human beings and their behavior really doesn't change. And that's odd in a time of information, when you can look back at history and see where we made mistakes so we don't repeat them. Because this war, just like they said in Patriot, Mel Gibson's speech, this one, boy, it's going to be on your front lawn. This one's coming to your homes. This one's coming to your neighbors, your families, and your dinner tables. Sound familiar? Hey, Henry. Brian, how you doing? Let's see what y'all got to say, and then we'll start. God bless our founding fathers. May they guide us in these strange times. God bless America and all who read this. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome in, Brian. Toss up some bacon, Brian. Thank you for that. Here you go. Look. See? That quick. There you go. Bacon is love around here. So take all the bacon you want. We've got plenty to go around. Bring enough for the whole class. What, Ted? What did you get from Cisco? Oh, yeah, honey. There's going to be. Oh, is that what? Is it a mother storm? Oh, honey. No idea. I've been called that a couple times. A lot of times. Right? I'm fine with it. I'm comfy. I'm comfy. I'm good. Comfy. I like it like that. Gosh, man. Sometimes I can't do the view, man. I can't. I work all day with headphones in. Hey, here we come. Welcome edition, sweetheart. Thank you. Put some love out there. We needed some feminine up in there. Thank you. So anyhow, yeah, this is a hell of a story, man. What'd they do? They thought they were the toughest Americans till they crossed into the Blue Ridge Mountains. Yes, ain't that true? Ain't that true? And it's hard on everybody. Everybody's got a story like this, from the Oklahoma Trail to the 49ers, 1849, the gold rush, and the townspeople there, and anywhere there's, people are blazing a trail just to exist, fighting for the right to exist. Well, surrounded by Quakers in that part of PA made it tougher. Okay. Very conflicted on supplying the people in the camp. So true, Henry. Was a member of the Valley meeting next door to the camp. Okay, so this is a great point. Thank you for that. This is also, I brought it up last week when I was saying about, why didn't Washington follow the British, when they went through from Monmouth, the Battle of Monmouth. He took a lot of criticisms for that. Well, he knew the town that they were going through were all loyalists, for one, the entire town, very heavy. And the British were going to go through there and get to the harbor and, grab some boats and shoot on up to New York and connect them with the rest of the British Army, right? So Washington said if he did that, he was going to be completely wiped out because they would have had help from the town. And you'll see as the revolution goes on, the British start getting getting sly to that and go, you know what, let's go start rounding up our own militia from the town, and we'll have the townspeople, the loyalists, work for us. And things really goofy because, like I said, personal vendettas start coming out, and all those kind of things. So humans are going to be humans. So it's crazy to watch the same things happening over again. It's nuts. So we got to be smarter this time. I'm so glad to see y'all. All right, so let's get her started. And this one is Liberty, episode 3. And I hope you like it. Oh, wrong one. Choo-choo, Ted. We can't get through without just, oh my gosh, just terrible. I gotta fire the producer.
Hello, I'm Forrest Sawyer. Welcome to Program 3 in our series, Liberty. At the beginning of the Revolution, there was an enormous burst of enthusiasm for the cause. After the Battle of Lexington and Concord, one Connecticut congregation heard that a regiment was preparing to march to Boston without shoes. The parishioners took off their own shoes and gave them to the young soldiers. But it's one thing to be enthusiastic about a small skirmish. It's quite another to wage war against the greatest military power in the world. Our episode begins in the summer of 1776. George Washington has an enormous job ahead of him. Much of his work is what today we'd call public relations. He has to forge a national army with soldiers coming from what were, in effect, 13 separate countries. And he has to convince the people to support a war fought not for territory or treasure, but for an abstract idea: liberty.
On July 9th, 1776, New Yorkers received the news from Philadelphia. They are now citizens of a new country. The Declaration of Independence has been signed.
The Declaration of Independence obviously was a crystallizing moment. People realized that they had cut the cord and that there was no easy turning back.
If I remain loyal to England, 3,000 miles away, I become an enemy in my own land. If I follow the rest of my countrymen, I become an enemy to my mother country. How can I even start to unravel this argument when all reason has turned to killing and bloodshed?
A crowd pulls down the statue of George III, erected only 3 years earlier. The head is displayed on the end of a stake. The rest will be hauled away to be melted down into bullets.
4,000 pounds of lead to be made into musket balls. I hope that emanations from George will make a deep impression on some of his red-coated Tory subjects.
War is coming. New Yorkers watch the harbor with apprehension.
I'm sitting in the outhouse, which has a good view of the harbor. I get my discharge, and then I look out the window. Well, I can't believe my eyes. It's like a forest of pine trees are moving in out there. In 10 minutes, the whole bay is full of ships. It looks like all London has floated here.
30,000 troops, 10,000 sailors, 300 supply ships, 30 battleships with 1,200 cannon. It is the largest seaborne attack ever attempted by England until the 20th century.
A whole host of emotions must have gone through Americans, wondering, did they have the stuff to take on the largest army, the largest empire in the world? And seeing this huge force, realizing that the British were not going to let this empire go without a big fight, it must have been a terrifying and frightening moment in July of 1776.
News of the Declaration of Independence reaches Ambrose Searle, Secretary to Admiral Howe of the British Navy.
We are presently at anchor in full view of New York and the rebel headquarters under Washington. We heard that Congress has announced that the colonies are to be independent states. The madness of these deluded people.
As far as the British were concerned, there was both an emotional and a practical response to American independence. The emotional response is, how dare they? How dare they? You know, that the British had fought to clear the French out of North America, that these people were subjects of the British Crown, that this was totally unacceptable.
King George is determined to restore British sovereignty to the colonies. But he is reluctant to wage an all-out war.
War was a war against foreigners. War is real war. War is a war against national enemies. But the Americans weren't foreigners. They were Englishmen, Scotsmen. They were the king's subjects, deluded perhaps, misguided, troublesome, turbulent, inconvenient, but not foreigners, not an enemy, not people you could or should think in terms of fighting a war against.
I love that so much. Inconvenient.
The British forces are led by two brothers. Viscount
Comes the Howes.
Richard Howe heads the Navy. Sir William Howe leads the Army. They plan a demonstration of British naval power, fully confident that this will force the rebels to the bargaining table. July 12, 1776. Admiral Howe orders two of his frigates, the Phoenix and the Rose, to sail up the Hudson, guns blazing.
The roar of the cannon is so terrible that many in our army and navy have never heard anything like it before. Apparently, the rebels were frightened by the din. The whole scene is awful, grand, I might even say beautiful, except for the sad fact that people's lives are at stake, even if they are the lowest of criminals.
That was the sentiment, man.
After this show of force, the Howes send out
course it would
peace
be.
feelers to General Washington. Surely now he will be willing to negotiate. They meet at...
I got to stop it right here because I got to tell you, this doesn't make you, if you weren't a George Washington fan before, you should be after this statement right here because he's a cheeky monkey.
Colonel Henry Knox's headquarters on Broadway.
Under a flag of truce, General Washington met with no less than the Adjutant General of Howe's army. He informed our commander that Lord Howe had come to New York with great powers to pardon those in rebellion. General Washington told him that he had come to the wrong place. The Americans had not offended, therefore they needed no pardon. This confused the adjutant. Has Your Excellency no particular message which you would honor me to convey to Lord and General Howe? Nothing, sir, but my compliments to them both, replied Washington, upon which he bowed, and they parted on the most genteel terms imaginable.
The
And
message
so
is
it's
clear. The Americans will not back down. This means war. A war which will begin here in New York City.
New York was virtually indefensible for the Americans. It was an island. We didn't have a navy. The
Right.
British had a navy. It was
Sure.
one of the most difficult locales for Washington to even conceive of defending. I think he would have preferred not to have tried,
Problem.
but the Continental Congress felt that some show had to be made, and he agreed.
The British must wait 2 months for all their ships and supplies to arrive. Meanwhile, they stage on Staten Island. In the sweltering New York summer, the soldiers train. Led by officers in heavy wool coats and wigs, they parade in full battle dress. They write home about the heat, the ferocious mosquitoes, and the American women.
The fair nymphs on Staten Island are fresh meat for our men. A girl cannot step into the bushes to pick a rose without risk of being ravaged. We have the most entertaining court-martials every day.
The British are joined by 8,000 German troops, known as Hessians.
There
With
they
a
are.
reputation for being savage fighters, these soldiers are rented from German princes for £7 a head. The British forces are among the biggest, best trained, and toughest armies in the world. They believe Washington's troops will present no serious opposition.
A lot of the generals had been to America because they had been fighting there in the 7 Years' War, in the French and Indian War, and their opinion of colonial troops was on the whole pretty low. They didn't think much of colonial troops, and, you know, who were the senior officers of the colonial militia? Men like Major Washington, who'd surrendered the moment he'd met the French the first time. This was the kind of thing which didn't inspire confidence among experienced professional soldiers, and they tended to take the view that colonial troops were all very well as long as you kept them out of the way of the enemy.
The men who joined the American Army could not be more different from the hardened career soldiers of the British Army. The Americans come with a variety of motives. Some are patriotic. Some are just in search of adventure. A typical soldier is Joseph Plum Martin, a young farmer from Connecticut. In a diary which he will keep for the 7 years of the war, he records the day of his enlistment.
Last year when I saw my friends marching off, I went home, bit my fingernails, imagining them all telling me of their exploits, swaggering home.
Good is.
Their hairbreadth escapes. So I took up a pen, made my mark, and joined. Now they make you sign up for a whole year. I was just hoping to get a priming before I took on the whole coat of paint of a soldier.
The soldiers come from all over.
He should have gotten an Oscar for this. What he did in this documentary, Philip Seymour Thomas, he did a great job. And Joseph Plum Martin's journal, he kept it from beginning to end. That was one of the first talking about, you know, how could you not sign up, you know, and so many wound up like that. But his account of this entire war from beginning to end is the most phenomenal thread in this whole documentary. You're going to love him. He does a great job.
The sovereign state of Maryland, the plantations of Virginia, and the wilderness of New Hampshire. Many young men have never been away from home. They are meeting people from other states for the first time in their lives.
You know, they put me in this regiment, half New Englanders and half Pennsylvanians. There's folks as different as night and day. I mean, myself, I'd rather be fighting with a tribe of Indians than with these Southerners. I mean, they're foreigners. Can hardly speak English. They don't like me either. And they call me that damn Yankee. That's about the nicest thing they say.
One has to remember that in 1776, Americans are not in any way one nation yet. In fact, most people would have thought of their nation, if they talked in those terms, or of their country, as Virginia or Connecticut or Massachusetts, and their loyalties were to their province. which had, each of them had its own long history. And I think that was a question that a lot of people wondered in 1776 about the term American. Just how American are they, and whether they weren't Virginians and Massachusetts and Connecticut people first.
The general has heard that jealousies have arisen among the troops from the different provinces. Name-calling, which causes irritation and can only serve to hurt the noble cause in which we are all engaged. The provinces are all united to oppose a common enemy. All distinctions must be sunk in the name American. George Washington.
Washington's goal is to forge a united and professional army. He is fiercely determined that the British see him as a general worthy of the name. In 18th century terms, that also means being a proper gentleman.
There's no character in the Revolution who is so obsessed with doing what was proper, what the best people thought was the right thing to do.
Big part of George.
One of his first books that he owned was, and that he copied out assiduously at the age of 16, were rules of etiquette from a courtesy manual. Washington is a man of intense self-will, very quick to anger, but he controlled it. Almost his whole career is an act of will. The reason he behaved the way he did, sometimes in a wooden-like fashion, was because he was trying to live up to what he saw was the ideal classical image of a hero.
Trying to keep that anger down.
A great part of the problem was that the British had not treated the American officers like gentlemen before the war, when they had been mere provincial officers. And it's often said that if only the British had made George Washington a regular colonel in the armed forces of the Crown, he wouldn't have been a revolutionary at all. Indeed, might have been fighting energetically to put the rebellion down.
One observer is Nicholas Creswell, an English traveler.
This guy's great.
I met Washington, you know. Before the war, I visited him at Mount Vernon. He's an honest man, no vices, except, of course, ambition. He's not well educated, he doesn't speak very well, but there is something about him that makes people close to him very loyal. Look at how he's managed to hold together all those stubborn, headstrong groups he's had to work with.
He had something. He had something.
August 21st. An American spy reports to Washington that Lower Long Island, what is now Brooklyn,
I love
will
this
be the
so
first
much.
target of the British. Washington rushes in reinforcements.
This is fantastic.
We immediately start fortifying our positions. Fear is a great inspiration for hard work. I have my gun, canteen, knapsack, and a blanket. It's my first battle. Will I be able to kill someone else?
The next morning, under cover of the formidable guns of the British Navy, 15,000 British troops land unopposed at the southern tip of Long Island.
Look at this. Look at this shit.
Waiting behind defensive barricades
Can you
3
imagine?
miles away are the Americans.
Can you imagine?
They are outnumbered 2 to 1.
Just a couple miles. Yet they stand there. America.
The British regiments, in dense formation, march up the open fields toward the heights. Their plan? To crush the rebellion in one decisive battle.
That was the
British
plan.
advance to within about 300 yards of us and begin a very heavy fire. Bullets and shells fly very fast, now and then taking off ahead.
It's very, very difficult to reconstruct these extraordinary battles of the past. But they did indeed form up in dense ranks, very carefully ordered. They did march up to within musket shot of each other with the officers in front. And they did fire at each other at very close range indeed.
Look at the form of fighting.
Another 100 yards away had almost no chance of hitting him. The ball might go anywhere. So the only way you could be certain of inflicting casualties on the enemy was to mass your men as closely as possible together. So both sides formed up into compact clumps and fired at each other, each hoping that the other would run away.
Once you would have loaded for the first volley, fired your first volley, returned your musket and reloaded, the noise was such that there was no hearing anything. You couldn't hear commands. You'd be very lucky if you could hear a drum beat, for instance, which was one of the reasons they used drums for various commands once the volleying started. But it was then fire at will, and you just kept firing until you heard either a drum beat or somebody yelling in your ear, cease fire, cease fire. There was no organization after about the third volley.
I want you to take that in. There's no organization after the third volley. This is where your drummer boys come in and, you know, they're standing there. And the order was to not fire on the drummer boys. I laughed when somebody put that up here because I know that's what it says. That's correct history. There was an order for that. But where in this do you find any order, right? So, again, one of the most mind-boggling things for me on this is this does not change going into the Civil War, which is again why Gatling came out with the gun, because he really thought that if you brought this out, surely they would turn and run and surrender. You know, it's too fierce and too vicious. They're just not gonna, you know, go up against it. But again, underestimated the intestinal fortitude of a soldier that's fighting for something they believe in. They're not running, you know. Now, again, granted, there was a lot of running and regrouping and catching back up and skirmishes here and back and forth, you know, things like this where they'd run and they'd be chased. The British would chase them. And you're going to see that happen here. But what you're also going to see is something that George Washington was starting to perfect and starting to realize that these British generals, and the commanders don't know how to go up against the militia the way they fight, because they partially are fighting like hunters and how they would fight Indians. They're fighting in a more of a guerrilla warfare. Right here, he's trying to put them up to stand up against them. But they go back to the default setting. You know, the default setting is, look, people are shooting at me. I think I know how to not get shot better than you're telling me, so I'm just going to do it. And that's the kind of, I can't get control of this. And there's too much noise and nobody knows the commands, and that's the untrained part. But what he starts to see is, okay, maybe I don't change them completely. Maybe we just fine tune this a little bit. And I think that's when they really start to win, because they're out jockeying, you know, and Congress sees it as General Washington is getting out generaled by the generals, right? But the way I see it, the way history's kind of unfolded for me when it comes to Washington, was he was seeing it as it unfolded to him and adjusting to it. He was a natural leader, but he also was fighting under that cumbersome umbrella of trying to do things in the correct manner. That moral compass was strong with him too. And he hated to discipline the deserters, but he knew if he didn't, that they would all desert, because who wouldn't? You know, they're hungry and he has nothing to give them. And I mean, I have absolutely nothing to offer you and you'll probably die a horrible death. But, you know, will you stay a little while? That's kind of what he's got. You know, he's got no promise of any help coming. The letters he's sending to Congress are coming back. You know, in the musical I told you guys to watch if you wanted to, 1776, there's a wonderful part in there where the guy comes in and he'll bring in a letter from Washington and he throws it down on John Hancock's desk, and John Hancock reads it to the Continental Congress. And this is actually what happened. They didn't sing it like they do in the movie, but it's really good anyway. So the whole thing is George Washington keeps ending all these letters, your honorable, George Washington, but the last thing he writes before that, instead of sincerely or, whatever salutation he might put in there or ending, would be, is anybody there? Does anybody care? I have nothing to feed these men. We have no blankets. They have no shoes. They have no ammunition. We have the entire British Army coming at us, on sea and by land. Is anybody there? And everybody so easily blames Washington for it taking so long to find their cadence. But because that brilliant man, instead of being this kind of person that gets a dog and then spends all of this like craziness trying to make it not be a dog, or, you know what I'm saying? I hate all the things that a dog does, but I just want to have this dog. But I'm going to go against everything that the dog is naturally. We're going to crate it. We're going to don't chew, don't do this, don't dig, don't, you know what I mean? But he was smart enough to see it and adjust to it and use it to his advantage. And he uses it right here. And I'll shut up. But it's so important because we skirt over it all the time. My gosh, half of us got his picture in our pocket on a $1 bill. I doing this show. I can't tell you how many pictures came up of seeing statues of Washington in years not long ago being pulled down and covered in paint and just so many other things. And you don't even know this guy. Yeah, he made mistakes and they did things at the time, and take all things taken into consideration. Would you have been any different then? You don't get to know what you know now. You only get to know what your culture and what you've experienced in your journey, the data you've collected on that journey. How did they get such courage and wisdom? We have this information and can look back, yet we don't, and we keep making the same mistakes. Now there's a question. If you do not learn from history, destined to repeat it. I want to learn. How about you?
The Patriots hold the high ground. They shoot down on the advancing enemy soldiers. The British realize that they must change tactics or suffer heavy casualties.
Howe was a professional. When he came over with his troops, he immediately sent out his light dragoons to scout the territory. He also had some local Tories that were guiding him, and they found out that the passway over on the American left was virtually unguarded. The Americans, not knowing any topography, they just slipped up, and they left the Jamaica Pass unguarded.
With half their forces in the front, keeping the Americans occupied, a division of 10,000 British soldiers marches undetected through the Jamaica Pass to a position behind the American lines.
Our men stand amazingly well until 12 o'clock, when the main party of British, by a route we never dreamt of, surround us.
Suddenly they looked around, and here was Howe's army coming up behind them. Here was Howe's army coming up on the side. They had to control the line. Which way could they fire? They simply broke and they ran.
The Americans have only one escape route, through the Gowanus Marsh. The British slaughter the fleeing soldiers.
I can't describe the confusion and the horror of the scene. Artillery flying, our men running in every direction, and everywhere we turn, we meet the British or the Hessians. Men up to their knees in mud, screaming for help.
Reality of war.
Running to save their own skins.
It's not beautiful.
It was a catastrophe. And partly it's American amateurism at fighting this kind of big battle. They'd never fought a battle on that scale before. They'd never had an organization that was designed to fight that kind of battle before. This is new, and they got clobbered.
The rebels have courage.
But British discipline wins the day. They're raw troops, never seen action before. Their officers have no understanding of the strategies of war. The Maryland soldiers were from the best families in the province. They were heroes. Cut down in the bloom of their youth. The pursuit and slaughter lasted for many hours.
At that moment, in late August of 1776, it really looks as if you're going to lose the war in the first battle, just as the British commanders had predicted you would. British planning is based on the idea of one big decisive battle, and this looks like it, the Battle of Long Island.
The Americans have retreated to Brooklyn Heights.
Here we go.
Facing them is the British Army. At their backs is the East River.
And what is it?
Almost
Imagine
the entire Continental Army is
what
trapped.
it looks like now.
The British
Concrete.
wait for Washington to surrender.
Here we go.
In the 18th century, in European warfare, it wasn't just a question of winning, but it was also a question of how you won. In a way, it was better to lose well than to win badly. That was they thought the form and ritual of warfare was very important, and wished to behave like gentlemen at all times.
Isn't that crazy? It's so funny, but it's not. It's deep. It's very
According
deep.
to the gentlemanly rules of warfare, Washington should concede defeat. Instead, when night falls and a thick fog blankets the East River, he orders his troops to keep all their campfires burning. Then, quietly, he begins to ferry men, horses, and cannon back to Manhattan, a few boatloads at a time.
Go ahead, George.
By morning,
Go
the
ahead.
entire American army has crossed over to New York.
And the British finally discovered that
Hell
the
yeah.
fortifications were no longer occupied.
Hell
They rushed
yeah.
through down to the bank just as the last boat was pulling away.
Here it
and the
is.
last man in the last boat was George Washington.
Whoop!
The British are stunned.
I love it.
Washington should be very
Yeah,
grateful
they're
to
stunned.
General Howe. What a kind enemy we are. Instead of crushing the frightened, trembling enemy at once, he generously gives him time to recover from his panic and regroup. 20,000 of our best men stand on the banks of the East River.
I wonder if he waved.
Like
I
Moses looking at the promised
think he
land.
waved.
With the rebel
Probably gave him a
flags
little-
waving insolently in the air.
Little nod, maybe.
The troops and officers couldn't believe that they were just standing there, not doing anything.
Last man out. You gotta respect it.
The American army may have escaped capture,
I know
but the
I do.
British now occupy Brooklyn Heights. Their guns are trained on New York.
There we go. But New York,
Washington realizes that the city cannot be held.
very loyalist.
His soldiers grab everything they can, including the city's church bells, to be melted into bullets,
Go, George. Run.
and
Run,
begin a
boys.
retreat up Manhattan Island.
Go, boys, go.
The British move in to occupy New York City.
You can't imagine
Big party.
the joy of the city's inhabitants when we march in. Pure bedlam. They carry the king's officers on their shoulders.
I love
A
it.
woman pulls down the rebels' hated flag and stamps on it with contempt and indignation.
Most New Yorkers are fervently loyal to England, not to the Revolution. Indeed, about one-fifth of the entire American population will remain loyalists throughout the war.
Yep.
They must keep their political views to themselves in areas where patriots are in control. But here in New York, it is the supporters of the Revolution who must
Thank you,
keep quiet
sweetheart.
or
Love you,
leave.
baby.
We have fled. It was raining and thundering so hard we had to stop by the side of the road all night. When we did find a place to stay, all we got was a dirty bed on the floor. It's very hard for us that are used to living comfortable.
I'm sure it was. She did a good job, didn't she?
Travelers will carry the accounts of the disaster in New York along the dirt roads and rivers of 18th century America.
I love the way they did
It will
this.
take over a month for the news to spread to all 13 states. Near Boston, an anxious Abigail Adams writes to her husband John in Congress
Here
in
comes.
Philadelphia.
She's all creamy. Look at her.
My dearest friend, there are so many rumors flying around that it is impossible to know what to believe. Did you think that we would be able to hold on to Long Island? If we could not hold Long Island, are they going to take New York City? And if they hold New York, will they be able to cut off New England from the rest of the colonies?
She did a great job.
I assure you that we in Congress are as much at a loss to understand what happened in New York as you are. In general, our generals were out-generaled on Long Island. Every time our militia see the British, they very courageously panic, turn their backs, and run away. Our Massachusetts men behave just as badly as everyone else.
And they're not there. They have no clue what it's
As
like.
the British move in to occupy New York City,
It's crazy.
the Continental Army continues its retreat up through the countryside of Manhattan Island. It is not an orderly withdrawal. Troops that Washington has positioned to protect the rear of his fleeing army are
He gets
themselves
mad.
running at the first sight of British guns.
He's starting to lose his military bearing.
Washington explodes into a rage.
And it's one of the few times he really lost his temper. He threw his hat on the ground. He was on horseback. He yelled at them, screamed at them. He had his horse whip, and he was actually whipping some of the officers as well as the men. And finally, he just gave up. All of this terrible
just gave
pressure
in.
and disgust on him. He just sat there limply with Hessians coming at him just 80 yards away. And at that point, one of his aides de camp grabbed his horse and led him away.
He was having it hard, man. He was wrestling a lot with
Washington
himself.
is forced to accept the fact that he will not be able to conduct a proper European-style war because he does not have a European-style army. He is beginning to realize that he can't expect volunteer soldiers fighting for liberty to blindly follow orders. He will have to persuade them.
Well, this means that you have a different kind of an army, a more democratical army, maybe a more equalitarian army, maybe. And in some ways, it was the style of leadership that was going to be much more important for a Republican government later on. It was a very different kind of a relationship than you would get, for example, in the British Army, where there was no explaining, there were orders. And for those that didn't respond, there were punishments.
In the British Army, they were flogging soldiers and sailors with the greatest cheerfulness. That's what you did to a soldier if he misbehaved. You flogged him. In the Continental Army, Washington is always going around trying to persuade people. And of course, criminals in the army would be hanged or shot, but the armies run on completely different principles. So you had an army in which discipline was maintained by flogging against an army in which discipline was really ultimately maintained by exhortation.
It's wild, an idea. Do you see what I mean? This is what Washington has to work with. And again, I talk about the groups because Sons of Liberty and the boys, in Massachusetts, everybody in the town, everybody that's out in the farmland, everybody that's following the camps, the wives, the girlfriend, just everybody. Everybody's in it. The escaped slaves that are starting to join for freedom, and some are just escaping. And the different, choices they may have. Things like this are going on. The argument over slavery. People thinking that, okay, well, when I die, I'll leave it in my will, everybody's free. But then people rarely think about where are all these suddenly free people going? Do you see what I mean? It's like, okay, well, that's great because they have a choice to stay or to go. That's to be said. That's fantastic. Absolutely. So they feel the freedom, the quest for that freedom as well. And from these just crazed subsect of just people that want to be violent and want to start, be in riots and stuff like that, antagonizing the other people to join in, misery loves company. And then trying to figure out whether or not you can even go to the market and say anything, or maybe what you're buying. Hey, Kat, Maybe what you're buying even tells what side you're on, because now you're shopping, you're boycotting, you're not buying stuff that's coming over. And at this point, the stuff stops coming over. So supplies are cut off whether you want to boycott or not, you know. So everybody's got their vantage point, just like us. Everybody is concerned right now for the reasons that affect them the most, of course. And then other people in different degrees that of stuff that goes deeper. Like a lot of these people that you see pop up and talk, they all have a different vantage point, but they all have something very profound to say from that point of view. And it's all part of one big thing. And it's all important, just as important as the next. And it's very sad when they talk about all those boys dying in the swamp. And it's also sad to know, you know, like us, the first thing I thought of is, gosh, they probably got a development of condos on that right now, and people are wondering why, you know, their cabinet doors are banging. Or you get my point? Because that misery, that draw that's in the earth that doesn't forget, it almost begets more of the same, you know, somehow in time. So anyway, the people in here are really digging down deep and trying to find what can propel them through this third ring of hell known as war. And it's
Remember,
rough.
soldiers, you are free men, fighting for the blessings of liberty. Remember that you and your descendants will become slaves if you do not acquit yourselves like men. Remember Boston and Charlestown. The enemy discovered at great cost what a few brave men, fighting for their own land, for the best of causes, could do against soldiers for hire.
The notion of having a population that is personally engaged in war is really new. The great European powers in the 18th century built their power not on a bunch of enthusiastic soldiers, but rather on professional, rather mercenary forces that they'd recruited and paid to actually harness popular enthusiasm and to make it militarily effective.
Someplace comfortable, lying on the wet ground. And if you close your eyes in a moment's sleep, an alarm. You stand guard for an hour or two, or you're under attack from the enemy and you have to march another 5 miles.
Joseph Plum Martin cannot wait to go home. His enlistment will be up in 2 months, along with all the rest of the Army. Recruiting posters go up everywhere.
To all brave, healthy, able-bodied, and well-disposed young men, take notice. Those who may favor this recruiting party with their attendance will have the opportunity of spending a few happy years in viewing the different parts of this beautiful continent in the honorable and truly respectable character of a soldier, after which he may return home to his friends with his pockets full of money and his head covered with laurels. God save the United States.
But a losing general will attract few new enlistments. And Washington has already lost Long Island, New York City, and much of Westchester. Washington proposes something new, offering money and land to recruit soldiers for long-term enlistments. But Congress fears a standing army. They don't want to create a powerful military that could threaten the very liberty they are fighting for.
This is important.
After all, there's no real national government, so who is a national army going to be responsible and subordinate to? That is a very tricky situation, and there were a good many who worried that a national army would eventually, as it happened in the English Revolution of the 17th century, would take over, that the commander like Oliver Cromwell would establish himself as a dictator. After all, it did happen in England. It would happen later with Napoleon and the French Revolution. So it's not a foolish fear that a national army, independent in any way of political authority, could become a very dangerous organization.
John Hancock replies to Washington.
To General Washington. Sir, Congress is resolved to help you in the present critical state of our affairs. In order to give you all possible assistance in keeping the Army together, Congress has appointed a committee. With every sentiment of esteem and respect, your very humble servant, John Hancock.
Congress can do very little beyond forming committees. All political power remains with the individual states. Congress has no authority to tax, no way of raising money to supply or pay the Army.
Washington spent a very frustrating war, there's no doubt about it, in many ways. And among the greatest of his frustrations was dealing with Congress. A Congress that could not meet his basic needs, that could not even guarantee him an army that would be there a year from now. A Congress that periodically dissolved. And yet, Washington was so committed to the rule of civilian authority over the military that he was willing to absorb those blows, to deal with those frustrations.
What?
It is a
What'd he
measure
say?
of Washington's character, political skill, and I would say idealism, that he could put up with this Congress and never lose sight of the larger objective.
Sounds familiar to me. Just saying. Very familiar. The parallels blow your mind.
The Americans have one stronghold left on the whole of Manhattan, Fort Washington. The fort holds most of the heavy artillery of the Continental Army. The Americans are convinced that the fort is impregnable. But the British smash its defenses in one brilliantly coordinated attack. The capture of the precious stores in Fort Washington is a disaster for the Americans. Over 100 cannon, thousands of muskets, and 400,000 cartridges. These are all manufactured in England, and the Americans have no hope of replacing them. The British follow up with an attack on Fort Lee on the other side of the Hudson River. Washington watches the fall of the two forts. 3,000 American soldiers are dead or captured. It is the tragic finale to a 3-month string of catastrophes.
To John Augustine Washington, if I were to put a curse on my worst enemy, it would be to wish him in my position now. I just do not know what to do.
Yet he didn't give up.
It seems impossible to continue my command in this situation. But if I withdraw, all will be lost.
But he stayed in. You gotta love him for that.
The British are ecstatic.
Here's to you, George.
American soldiers are fleeing for their lives. The front has moved to New Jersey.
Their army is all broken in pieces, and the spirit of their leaders is broken also. We will be in New Brunswick tomorrow, if only it stops raining, headed for Philadelphia. I expect no opposition at all. I think we can safely conclude that it is just about over for them.
General Howe now gives the Americans another chance to surrender with honor. He offers New Jersey citizens a royal pardon if they will renounce the rebel cause.
And guess what Jersey did?
3,000 Americans accept the offer, including a signer of the Declaration of Independence.
There are a lot of Americans who think it is time to give up in late 1776, that they've made the best effort they could, but that the British Army, with the British Navy behind it and the British economy behind that, are just simply too strong.
And it's funny too how in each place that they try to take over, whether it's in the southern colonies or in New York. They go to the British take over New York, and everybody in New York said, let's have a party, and they start tearing down flags and, doing all the stuff, greeting them and having parties, right? They go into New Jersey, and New Jersey's kind of half and half, always has been with New York, which is crazy. And, they offer like, look, do you guys want to do this? Or are you with us? Because if you sign this paper, so New Jersey just lines up and go, okay, yeah, it's over anyway, let's do it. But it's not quite over. Jersey kind of comes back in this. But again, it's the times. What would you do in that case? What would you do in that case? Think right now where you live. And I don't know, you might be very rural and not have a lot of people around you. But if you're in that case, think of your town, the closest town, right? If everybody in that town, you had no idea what everybody else was, what side they were on, all of a sudden you're in a war, right? You don't know whether you kind of have an idea because of things they said in the past and kind of some of the things they've done, but you're not really sure, And then there's the ones that are all out, know it, and they've been feuding, like Hatfields and McCoys, right? This is in your front yard. This is in your territory. This is in your town. This is between you and wherever you go to get, supplies and things like this. It's in your town. It's on your doorstep. It's different. And people like George Washington, few and far between. There's a lot of people that are doing this for money and for fame. And sure, he wants to climb the ladder, but this man was not. He was aware of the things he was doing and how it looked. Again, this is my opinion, and how it looked from the outside in as a soldier should be, as a general, as a leader should be, right? He was concerned with that, yes. But inside, that's not what kept him going through times like this. Inside, somewhere along the lines, he really believed in what he was fighting for. And when he clicks into that, instead of just worrying about winning battles, he's already come to terms with the fact that he can't win them one-on-one, face-to-face. He's got to keep wearing them out and not let them destroy him, and see if he can run out supplies and everything else. But he needs help. If he could just get some help and some supplies and some backup, maybe, that would be cool. But Congress can't do anything. So he's up against the wall, and still he gets up and he presses on. He drives on. He does not quit. Never quits. But times like this in Valley Forge is a test.
December 1776. All of New Jersey is now in the hands of the British, who are garrisoned along the northern bank of the Delaware River, 30 miles from Philadelphia.
Yep. That's what it looks like, too.
Congress has fled to Baltimore.
There they go.
General Howe declares the war over for the winter. It is common in the 18th century to avoid fighting in winter. Armies face impassable roads, perilous half-frozen rivers, disease and starvation. Animals are a particular problem.
A human being is tougher, much tougher, than a horse or even an ox. A human being can go longer without food as long as he has water than an animal can. An 18th century army finds it very difficult to do anything in those months when there's no grass in the fields, no fodder for the horses. You can't feed the animals.
General Howe, comfortably settled in New York City, has begun the elegant winter season of balls and banquets. The talk of the town is about an affair he is having with a certain Mrs. Loring, the wife of one of his officers. Washington has retreated from New Jersey to Pennsylvania. It has turned bitterly cold. His soldiers have no tents and little winter clothing.
No food for 2 days. Pinched with hunger. I come across an oxtail that somehow escaped the dogs. I steer off to my tent with this prize, where I throw it on the fire and broil it. It's not long on my stomach before it starts to show a great inclination to be set at liberty again. I become more and more willing to listen to its requests. And with tears at parting with what I thought was my friend, I give it a discharge. It's a while before I'll eat oxtail again.
Wasn't that poetic?
Washington himself is now engaged in a personal battle for survival. Among the Army's top generals, there is open talk of replacing him.
Washington's attitude in late 1776 is one more of desperation than anything else. He's thinking that probably he'd be better send instructions back to his own estate and make provisions for the British winning the war. So there's not much on his mind except survival well into the month of December in 1776. Things look really bad, very bad indeed.
To John Augustine Washington, I have begged Congress again and again to send me soldiers with long-term enlistments. All I get back is delays and quarrels. Then the states send me officers who aren't fit to polish boots. John, I'm sick to death of what is going on. Every day things get worse. Congress botches things up, and I get blamed.
We have a report from an informant close to Washington's family. The general looks extremely dejected. He spends much of his time alone. People who have walked in on him found him in tears. His army has no blankets, none of the necessities of life. They're even out of salt. I have corroborated these facts with other informants.
Christmas is approaching.
It's
John
true.
Hancock sends Washington a gift, a barrel of his wife's salted fish.
Here's Cheeky George.
To John Hancock, my grateful thanks for the salted fish. I'm very fond of salted fish, but never think of it until it is placed before me. I hope you have not gone to too much trouble sending it to camp on my account. My compliments to Mrs. Hancock. George Washington.
Starving army gets a barrel of salted fish. So why can't everybody in Congress just to get together and get all the wives and everybody to send, provisions to this army? This is what Washington's pulling his wig out, pulling his hair out. Well, here's a fun fact. He wasn't fond of wearing wigs. Most of the time, he had his own hair. He'd fluff it out, and he would get it powdered so it would appear to be a wig. But most of the time, it was his own hair. He was one of the few ones that didn't wear a wig. So there's a fun fact. But whatever, he was pulling it out. You know what I mean? His own hair.
The fate of the United States now
Infuriating.
rests on Washington and 6,000 men. The first army in modern history to be fighting for a political ideal is facing its darkest moment. Traveling with the weary, exhausted soldiers is Tom Paine, the brilliant British writer whose pamphlet Common Sense had convinced many Americans to embrace independence. On a drumhead, he writes one of the most quoted essays in the English language.
American Crisis.
It is called The American Crisis.
Pay attention.
Washington immediately orders all of his officers to read it to their troops.
It's beautiful.
He hopes its words will inspire them to hold on for just a little longer.
Just a little bit.
These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from the service of their country.
But they that stand it now deserve the love and thanks of men and women.
Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. But the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph.
Heaven knows how to put a proper price on its goods. It would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated.
I fear none. I see no cause of fear. In the end, we will be the victors. For though the flame of liberty may sometimes cease to shine, the ember will never expire.
They'd kill an idea with a gun. Beautiful.
It is just before Christmas.
Thomas Paine.
The soldiers' terms of enlistment will be up on December 31st. In 1 week, Washington will be a general without an army. Across the Delaware River from the Americans, in the small town of Trenton, New Jersey, the Hessian Colonel Johann Rall and his brigade prepare to celebrate the holidays. Rall is in high spirits. He gives little thought to the American forces camped just across the river.
We don't need trenches or fortifications. The rebel soldiers, those country clowns, they're almost naked, dying of cold, have no provisions, no blankets. Let them come. We shall welcome them with our bayonets.
Washington decides to risk all his troops in a surprise offensive.
Love it.
Horses and cannon and the remains of his army will cross the half-frozen Delaware River in the middle of the night and launch an attack on the Hessian camp at Trenton. It's his last roll of the dice. All or nothing.
All the marbles, baby. Let's do it.
Is absolute secrecy. We do not really have enough men for the task, but we have no choice. Coordinate with Griffin and attack on as many of their posts as possible. The more confusion we can spread, the better.
Incredible.
December the 23rd, new orders. We are moving out with 3 days' rations. General Washington has just given the password for this operation. Victory or death. The plan is to move 2,500 men and 18 field guns across the river. Seems impossible. It's cold and stormy. Ice is floating in the river. The troops march to the boats in the most profound silence. Christmas, 3 a.m. All the troops have crossed the river and the boats have gone back for the artillery. I've never seen Washington so determined. He stands on the bank of the river, wrapped in his cloak, overseeing the landing of his troops, calm and collected.
We begin our march to Trenton. The horses pulling the cannon slip and slide. They're without shoes. So are the soldiers. The road to Trenton is literally marked with the blood of the soldiers' feet.
A great commotion near the meeting house. A Hessian running out from the house, yelling in German. 3 or 4 others come out with their guns. Bullets whistle over our heads.
The surprise is complete. Rall and his regiment are drunk and asleep. By the time they realize what is happening, the trap has sprung.
The hurry, fright, and confusion of the enemy is a scene out of the Final Judgment. They try to form lines in the streets, but our howitzers are already in place. They run behind the houses to hide, but we go after them with muskets.
Commander Rall tumbles from his horse. His soldiers throw down their guns. We take 1,200 prisoners.
Can you imagine?
Colonel Rall, who was, he was a great fighter, but he was also a great drinker and a great braggart.
Lots of ego.
It's interesting that Christmas night, he was at a party, and a man came to the door to see him. He said, it's very urgent, I've got to see him, let him know. And Rall wouldn't bother seeing him. So finally the man wrote a note, and they gave it to Rall. and they found it in his pocket after he died 2 days later. And it said, the Americans are coming to attack you tomorrow morning. He never bothered to read it.
He didn't even read it. That's some...
The victory at Trenton is a startling
regret
reversal
right
of
there.
fortune. Washington follows up with the defeat of a British brigade in the town of Princeton, 10 miles away. Suddenly, the whole psychological picture of the war has changed.
And a big old
Actually, Trenton
turnaround.
was a small skirmish. The British generals, you read their comment at the time, they're saying, how tiresome. But they don't regard it as being that serious in itself. You know, these things happen in war.
Well, in military terms, it isn't a big deal. You lost 1,000 Germans, but you can always go hire another 1,000 Germans. But it's extremely important on the American side. As the news spreads to all the colonies, there is a feeling that it may indeed be possible to reverse the course of this war.
New Jersey civilians who had signed a loyalty oath to the king
Yay.
come back to supporting the revolution.
Go New Jersey.
Volunteers from all 13 states
Sorry,
are
state.
rushing to fill the ranks of the dwindling army.
How about that?
And Washington, whose very command had been in doubt only a few days before, now becomes a national hero.
There you go.
This Washington is certainly a most surprising man, a natural-born general. The fact that this Negro-driving plantation owner can muster together some ragged beggars, the refuse of other nations, and keep England's most experienced soldiers at bay is, well, astonishing. Our country's finest chased by a tobacco planter. Poor old England, how thy laurels have tarnished.
From that point, he
That's
seems to
pretty
be
cool.
able to do no wrong. Washington, after these two little military victories, seems to exemplify the revolution. He is the revolution.
Good for him. Good for those boys, man. It's rough go.
As liberty continues, I beat them. I have beat the rebels. British victory turns to desperation.
I never dreamed I would be left to make my way through this hostile countryside, surrounded by enemies, without any cooperation from New York.
Burgoyne
They get
curses
big mad,
America,
ain't they?
and Franklin charms France.
We have formed a treaty with the French. This alliance will serve to keep the English bull quiet and make him behave himself.
Go ahead, Ben. Get in there. There you go. Quite the story.
You're watching PBS.
Quite the story, is it not? Liberty. I'm telling you what, man. Whoops. Sorry, guys. Read that. What they endured was quite something, you know, and there's more to come. We're not even there yet. It's some story, and it needs to be told, and it needs to be taught in schools, and it needs to be remembered correctly, as close to the facts as we can get it, and with the ability and the internet and all the wonderful novels throughout hit time, and you know how fast information can flow now. You know, you almost have to be careful. There's almost too much. You have to be very good at discerning and sorting stuff, and you know, if that's your thing, then you can get right through it. That's almost like the pendulum is swung all the way this way with the information, where they had a hard time getting it all through. And it's so easy for us to look back and to say, you know, why didn't, you know, the women get together and collect up, you know, whatever, make shirts and send them? Well, they did, but it took a while to get that together. You know, why didn't this one get to, you know, find out a better way to preserve something else and feed them, but whatever it may be. These things happened. They happened slowly. This was uncharted territory. They had never been together, the 13 colonies. They were hacking it out themselves. And what happened over here didn't necessarily happen over there. You know, it took a lot for, you know, I say the boys in Boston, but you know what I mean, the whole city that was trying to get this word out and get the movement moving, didn't necessarily affect, the southern colonies. They were, how do you get them involved in your fight? How do you get them involved in your what you're worried about, your future and your children's future and your grandchildren's future, your own survival? How do you want to live? And how do you get them to care if they're not feeling it, if they're not seeing it, if it's not affecting them? Gosh, that's a big task, right? I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that's, that is quite the task. And you have each one of these groups, the way I see it anyway, each one of these groups trying to achieve their goal, and their main goal, but in their own compartmentalized way, and going through their own struggles, like the Boston Massacre and everything that went down there, and all these prominent individuals that were there to tell the story. You didn't just have the Boston Massacre. You had the Boston Massacre, you had the shooting, you had the propaganda, you had good people for good reasons pushing propaganda. Well, could you say that on both sides? It depends on where you're sitting, right? So you have to say, in war, everything is, lies are fair too. Distraction and disinformation and anything to get you to win, it's for all the marbles. Why wouldn't it be? So if you expect it, you just hone all your skills and your tools to see through all that stuff. That's what these guys had to do. And they also had to try to get something to change, huge things to change for the better as they saw it, as it affected them. And convince other people that weren't even involved in that violence, that oppression, that problem. Because you've got people in the southern states going, well, we don't have any British soldiers walking around downtown, pulling our women into the bushes and breaking into our homes and ransacking through our stuff. And this did go on. It got ugly. Got real ugly. It's real ugly later, too. But what fascinates is what drives these people. You heard the despair in George Washington's voice. You heard the words of the soldiers and the townspeople, how it affected them. We had to leave. We're not used to, we're not used to this kind of discomfort. It's absconded their entire life. Turned it, ass over teacups, right? This is war. It's what war is like on your doorstep. The stories are heart-wrenching that come out of this war, as in any war. The personal effect, how it personally affected you. You lost somebody, you lost yourself, you lost everything. Because it wasn't just the awesome conversations around the table in the taverns or around the table in the, an upper middle class home where everybody sits around and several generations are sitting around that table and giving their opinions and their thoughts and what they're willing to do and who they're going to go fight for. And the same conversations happen in the Civil War as well. But there is a common thread in there, is how people did not realize how it was going to completely flip their world upside down. And then settle back if you win. And people like George Washington, who went through, granted, there was suffering all around him, and he was well aware. That's one of the things that was killing him the most, very much like Lincoln. He really cared for the soldier, the common man. He tried to sort it, which is why there were camp followers and families, because he went against everything he thought as far as being a commanding general. But he knew if the families were there, they wouldn't desert. They would stay. And then somebody wonderful with words, wordsmith like Thomas Paine comes in and lays down, after Common Sense, lays down the American crisis and puts it all, all out there on the paper, writes it on the drumhead. Love these stories. And writes something like that from the heart. Should read it. It's available. You can get it on YouTube. Pick your reader, whatever kind of voice you like, the way they read it. But get somebody who puts heart into it, or read it for yourself and then read it again, because it fits today. And I'm glad I know that there's people like George Washington that are out there that are fighting for things that they believe in, whatever country you're in. And the scared mother that's trying to keep the farm going with 6 sick kids and who knows what coming out of the woods to try to disrupt their day and their household and their home, take what what little they have. It's heartbreaking to watch the Continental Army lose all that equipment. And as you heard the narrator say, all that stuff was made in England. There is no hope of replacing this. Every move I make could lose this, could lose everything. And we will all surely, hang for treason. That's a given. But everything else is lost too. And there were good men and good women that knew what was at stake. And it was their liberty, and it was their freedom. And as crazy as that sounds, to have people that were around them that were trying to struggle to get their freedom too, this also was an opportunity for a lot of them to get hope and dig down and find in themselves a lot of different pathways to get there. And a lot of wonderful people came out of it. Last week we looked at that young girl. I don't know if you missed it, but when we took a look at the Boston Tea Party ship, when we went to Boston on that little virtual tour last week, right? And she told the story at the end that she was also portraying this young girl. She was 14. She was a poet, and she was, I don't know her full story, so I don't know if she was born free or parents were born free or what that was. But she was the first Black person to get published. And her pamphlets were on that same ship that the tea was on. And it was the first time anybody had been published. It was before Harriet Tubman and everybody else. And it was very cool to know that that could exist, because it also gave other people hope to say, wow, how'd you get there? Show me that way. And people started reaching out and being, everything that they could be, and taking chances and things. So we're starting to grow from all angles at this point. Revolution goes on. I hope you guys got some hope out of some of these things. Like I said, not just the parallels. It's astonishing to me, but you got to dig history, and I think it's important. So again, whole purpose of this is not only to enjoy it together and watch it and see what you think about it, but I hope you're getting something out of it, and I hope you show it to a kid that might not get a chance to see it anywhere else, and sit there and talk about this stuff with them and see how they feel about it, So there you go. History does repeat, my love. So good night, Ted. Good night, everybody. I love you guys. I'll get you out of here. And look, we're almost on time, so that's great. The next one is, of course, episode 4. I hope you're watching it with us. I think I dropped let's drop it again, the link, so you guys can see. Why are you doing this to me? Hold on. Doggone it. It won't let me do it. It won't let me drop the link. If anybody's got that link to the archive. But anyway, it's just put in Liberty 1997 archives.gov. It'll come up. And you can watch it all in a thing. We'll be here next Sunday with number 4. and it's an exciting episode as well. I hope you got something out of this. I hope it gives you, you know, a little something, a little distraction from the crazy stuff out there. Although going back and looking 250 years ago, it does remind you a lot of the stuff that's going on today. So again, if they did it, you can do it, and maybe you can pick up some stuff along the way. I did not tell you. I'll tell you what. I need to tell you this real quick because I did. What are you eating? I had. If I can get this. A new one for you tonight, and I didn't want to let you go because Kathita sent it in, and it's Colonial Marlboro Pie. Take 12 spoons of stewed apples, 12 of wine, 12 of sugar, 12 of melted butter, 12 of beaten eggs, and a little cream. Spice to your taste, and lay in paste number 3 into pie crust. And lay into a deep dish. Bake 1 hour and a quarter. From Amelia Simmons, 1796. So, and also colonial style home. I thought that was kind of cool, you know. So there you go. That's one of the recipes. And let's pass that. Another nice colonial layout. A little food. What are they eating? We'll talk about that next week. But she sent these great pictures too of gathering food. And you know, as we leave tonight, think about how hard it was just to collect, to eat in a day, you know, and how much time do you have on your hands? And now you got a war. It makes it even worse. So, you know, wars don't always make a bad situation better. It always makes it worse. But at the end of it, did it achieve everything you went into it for? I don't know. Maybe there's other ways to get better results, one would think. So let's end it with colonial cream of peanut soup. And it's very easy to make. I hear that, oddly enough, with our gentleman tonight, George Washington was said to have had, if he could, every day have a bowl of cream of peanut soup. So it was his favorite. You got 1 minced onion, celery minced. You've got 2 tablespoons of butter, vegetable or chicken broth, peanut butter, sour cream, roasted peanuts, and salt and pepper to taste. I doubt he had the sour cream and maybe the peanut butter, but not sure. So they must have made a mush out of, you know, this is an updated thing. So it's pretty cool. I'll pass, but maybe you're braver than I. And again, everything that they say, it's so easy to look back on this history and just as it rolls off your tongue, you know. They crossed the Delaware and chunks of ice, and you know, we're going to bring that up again later on down the line. And if you want to see a good rendition of the crossing of the Delaware and what happened there and what a big deal it kind of was, the crossing with Jeff Daniels playing George Washington is very good, and it is available on YouTube and probably a couple of the other channels too. I'm not sure, Tubi. But I hope you watch it. I hope you're watching this along with. Thank you for being here tonight. And I was going to have more paranormal and stuff in it too. But again, with everything going on this week, it was hard even, you know, getting it all together to pull a show. But I figure, you know, if these guys can do these winter soldiers, we've got to be winter soldiers too. So I hope you're inspired by the words of Thomas Paine and Patrick Henry and John Adams and all these wonderful people, Ben Franklin and George Washington. If you're inspired at all, I suggest there's several books out there that just have compilation of his letters and his orders back and forth to his generals. He had a great rapport with them. He held several of them very dear. The people he trusted. And that's why when Benedict Arnold kind of turned tail and turned coat and committed treason and wanted to give over West Point to the British, it broke George Washington's heart. It really, really did. And at the same time, he had to kill somebody he respected very much, Major Andre. And in the beginning of this, you heard his ghost story. And there's going to be a lot of ghost stories and things like this going through this because so much happened at this time. And so many of us probably live near there. And I know I do. In different places this may have happened. And wherever you are, I'm sure something like this happened in time. So maybe we can learn a little something from this, to maybe we can do something as light workers to maybe stop it from happening again. So I think it's going to give us a lot of insight on what these people went through, and a lot of insight on how you can really see the good prevailing in the darkness. And I think that's the biggest message of all. And I love you guys. And we're going to get out of here. Let me grab something to play us out, and we will get out of here. Thank you for spending the time with me. I appreciate you guys, and I hope you're enjoying it. It's a little something different, but you know what? I think it's important. I'm really glad that you are here with us to do it. Let's see. Which one is that one? Something good. I wish I hadn't lost the Skeleton Fairy, Mr. Ted, where I would be playing it for you, my love. Give Connor hugs, and everybody out there, if you're going through hard times, we send you good thoughts and energy. I've got so many things up here now. It's hard to find anything on the way out. Okay, guys. Tell you what we'll do. We'll just go old school. How about that? All right, guys. Good night, everybody. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I love talking about this stuff, and I love talking about it with you guys. So thanks for being here and putting all your input in. Thank you for the super chats. And if you went to my PayPal, I appreciate you so much, and hope to see you tomorrow night with Steve. Not sure what we're doing. We're cooking up something fun, maybe something a little different. Don't know. But I hope you'll be there with us, and I hope you have a wonderful day tomorrow. Remember, keep the lights on and enjoy the journey. Good night, everybody.